Right, so we're in part 4 of Romans chapter 8, and we don't go an awful lot further from yesterday. And in verse 31, Paul says, "And what shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us?" If God is for us, who is against us? Now, let's just unpack that a bit, because I think Paul is telling us more than just, God is powerful. I think Paul is saying here that there are certain things going on in our lives that we cannot just ignore. We may be anxious. We may be a bit nervous about what the future is going to hold. We may be feeling that sense of grief and trial and suffering, and so many people even in the Christian world are saying things like, don't be anxious, don't fear, don't worry about these things, because the Bible says don't worry. And we can feel guilty that actually I am worrying, I am anxious, and how many times I try and convince myself I'm not, actually I still feel anxious. Now, what Paul is saying here is he doesn't want you to ignore those thoughts of anxiety and fear. What he wants you to do is put them on a scale. Now, if you can remember in old days where we had scales, there were sort of two sides to the scale, and there was a pivot in which they went up or down according to how much weight was on either side. And that's the sense in which Paul is talking here about how to compare what's going on. On the one hand, if God is for us. On the other hand, who can be against us? Against us are all the anxiety, the fear, the worry. And we know that actually the Bible tells us not to worry, not to fear, but we actually still fear. On the other hand, there's God. And Paul is saying, now just look. Here's the worry, here's God. Weigh them up. And this is what happens. God overwhelms the sense of worry and fear. God comes and replaces that anxiety and that fear with himself. So when Paul says, if God is for us, who is against us? He's telling us, he's encouraging us to think, how much bigger is God than my situation? How much bigger is he than my fear? How much bigger is he than my anxiety? Those anxieties are very real to some of you at the moment. We're not going to play them down. We're not going to say dismiss them, but what we are going to say is look at the weight of God. Look at the weight of the love and the care of God, of sending his own son. Those are the things which weigh down, are heavier by far. These are the things of God. These are the things which overwhelm our fear and our anxiety. And then Paul goes on to give all sorts of examples of, if God did this, then goodness me, what he's doing is heaping more and more on this God's side of the scale to tell us and encourage us that actually God is far bigger than we think. He's far bigger than the problems that we're facing, and he's going to overcome them. So when you read this verse, don't think it's dismissing the trials and difficulties you're having. No, it's saying, yes, we know they're there, but God is bigger. God overwhelms them. God comes and pulls those scales down, and we see how big God is. Encourage you to spend a bit of time meditating on that, really getting that into your life. And that's the end of this session, and there's one more to go. See you tomorrow. Bye.